The higher the viewer. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Cost of Living, which is episode 20 of season 5 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the 5th season episode, Cost of Living. So Cost of Living is the episode where Lwaxana Troi comes on board the ship and she announces that she's getting married, but we find out the man she's marrying she hasn't met and just corresponded with. And in the meantime, Alexander is misbehaving and Worf is having a hard time keeping his behavior under control, so he enlists the help of Counselor Troi. But then when Lwaxana comes on board, she makes friends with Alexander and kind of messes up everything that Troi and Worf are trying to do with Alexander, and makes friends with him, takes him on the holodeck. And when her husband-to-be arrives, we find that he's a prude who is absolutely nothing like Lwaxana. And Alexander helps Lwaxana see that she should be herself, and that she was just doing it because she was lonely, and that's a bad reason to get married. So when her wedding day happens and she was supposed to show up wearing a very conservative dress, she shows up naked as per Betazoid customs. This, of course, outrages the husband-to-be who leaves the ship. And Lwaxana thanks Alexander for letting her be herself. So, so as you will soon see with my Patreon comments at the end of the video, it's very indicated of people don't like this episode. And it's not just them. I've gone online and watched a lot of reviews, read a lot of reviews, and most people seem to be extremely negative on this episode. So again, this is going to be another example where I'm going to differ from the popular opinion, but this time in the opposite direction, because a lot of times throughout season 5, with episodes like Ethics or Power Play or Conundrum that everyone else seemed to love, I was a lot more negative on it, or a lot more down on it, where this is going to be the opposite occasion, where I'm actually going to be more positive on this episode than a lot of people seem to be. Because here's the thing, I actually think it's kind of funny. I think this is one of the better Lwaxana Troi episodes. Not the best. Like, the best two would be her previous appearance, Half a Life, which is the best one, and the other second best one, it would be Dark Page. But this is probably my third favorite. It probably goes Half a Life, Dark Page, this episode, then Haven, and then way below all of those would be The Forsaken on D Space Nine, and then what's the other one? Oh, Fascination on D Space Nine, and then The Muse on D Space Nine, and at the very bottom, Manhunt from second season of TNG. So, but those 4 episodes would be at the absolute bottom of crap. They're all shit. But out of the decent Lwaxana Troi episodes, I think would be Haven, then this one, and then Dark Page and Half a Life is easily the best one. I don't think I'm missing one out. I think that's all of them. But yeah, so their TNG appearances are way better in DS9. I've talked about this before, but I can't hammer this home enough. The D Space Nine ones are the worst, other than Manhunt. But anyway, she has no fucking business being on that goddamn station. Sorry. Anyway, so this episode, so I found it kind of amusing. It's not like a great episode or a, one I would pick out as one of my favorites or something that throws me away. It's a fun popcorn episode. It's, a humorous time. A lot of times when TNG tries to do comedy, particularly with Lwaxana Troi, they don't do a good job. And I know what I was forgetting. I was forgetting Lwaxana Troi. I didn't mention that one. That one was kind of in the middle. It's beneath this haven, but above the four crappy ones. So it's kind of, so the four good ones would be Haven, this one, what's it called? Dark Page, then Half Alive. And so Lwaxana Troi would be in between the four bad ones and the four good ones, so right in the middle. I knew I was forgetting one. But anyway, because that's an attempt at doing comedy that wasn't all that funny, except for the ending scene, which saves it, where Picard's doing poetry. That was hilarious. But yeah, I think that the comedy actually works. I remember I used to quote this episode with my sister when I was younger, particularly the scene when Worf is in the counseling session with Alexander and Counselor Troi, and Counselor Troi asks Alexander if there's anything that he would want Worf to do, and Alexander says, "Oh, he yells all the time," and Worf is like, I do not yell." And then Troy's response was, "Well, then you should have no problem with that one." That was so we always used to quote that. I do not yell. That's hilarious. And then he had other, like, the higher the fewer. That's just classic. I mean, a friend at school used to go around saying that a lot. The higher the fewer. Because it's like, what the fuck does that even mean? And that's the whole point. That's why it's cool. I just would like pointing that a lot. And I mentioned the card game, the Star Trek Next Generation card game I used to play, and several other videos. There was this dilemma that, to try to stop you from solving the mission. It was just called the higher the fewer. And however many crew members you had in a away team, that's how many points you lost. So it tries to penalize people because people would try to just beam down with way too many people, and so they could go through the dilemmas too easily. So this is a way to deter people from doing that. But yeah, that's just so classic. The higher the fewer. But of course, other funny moments is mainly Worf, particularly when he goes into that holodeck program and it has that, like, wind-blowing ball that's trying to not let anyone pass it unless they're, like, happy or whatever, and Worf just, like, smacks it and pops. Oh my god, that was hilarious. And of course, at the end of the episode where they're having a mud bath and we see Counselor Troi, we see Lwaxana and Alexander, they're all talking about what they've learned, and then at the very end we just cut to Worf and he's like up to his neck, he's like, "Are we just supposed to sit here?" And it was so funny. So this is one of the rare comedy episodes of Star Trek that actually work, that is actually funny. I don't know if I put this in my top 10 funniest episodes of Star Trek. I think I did. I think this is like number 8 or something, because it deserves to be up there, because Star Trek usually doesn't do comedy well. And this is one of the rare examples where it does. Classic ones like Tinker, Tenure, Dr. Spy, even The Bride of Chaotica was good, but the funniest, of course, is the Magnificent Ferengi over on Deep Space Nine. But this one's definitely up there in my humble opinion. Now, a lot of people seem to hate this episode because there's two annoying characters that everyone hates, Alexander and Lwaxana. Now, I'm not that big on Alexander, but I don't hate him. I don't find him particularly annoying. I don't think he's an annoying character. I didn't like the episode New Ground, as I talked about, but that's just because it was boring and there wasn't much there to it. I actually think this is a better episode, much better episode than New Ground, because it at least has comedy in it, but also it's a better character story for Alexander, I think, because that one, they just throw in some bullshit with him, like, lying and stealing shit, and we're like, oh no, I'm gonna send you away to boarding school, which is fucking stupid. But this one, it was not so silly. It was more of, Worf being frustrated on how to deal with them, and which, it's true, because he had no training as a father. It was thrust on him all of a sudden, so it makes sense that he wouldn't know how to behave as a father, and of course it's become commonly known that Worf is a terrible father, but that has more to do with, I think Deep Space Nine is the death knell, and that when they brought back Alexander for that is what really signified him as a terrible father. But that's something I'll get into more when I get to Deep Space Nine. But anyway, and to combine Lwaxana Troi, to throw her in the mix, was very good. And I watched this episode on the Blu-ray, and there was a deleted scene for it that I hadn't seen before, and I really liked it. Like, I think they should have kept this deleted scene in the episode, because it really explained, like, the theme of the episode, because it showed Worf and Counselor Troi in Troy's office, where Worf is. It was after Alexander said, "The higher, the fewer," which is another hilarious scene, by the way, when Worf was like, "Just eat." He's like, "I don't understand. You said no Klingon should break his word." He's like, "Understand later. Just eat." And then Alexander just goes up to him, "Father, the higher, the fewer," and walks out. He like snaps and breaks his food. That was another funny scene. So anyway, the deleted scene takes place after that, and Worf goes to Troi in her office, and he's just bitching about Alexander and how he's misbehaving all the time, and Worf doesn't know what to do or how to handle it. But at the same time, Troy's not really responding to that. Instead, she's going on about how she doesn't know what to do about her mother and doesn't know how to handle her mother, and tells the story about when she was a child at a birthday party and her mother showed up with like 4 people carrying her on the throne or something like that really embarrassed her, just how her outrageous behavior, and that she felt like that she was always acting like a mother to her own mother, and her mother was acting like a child. So that was actually a really fascinating deleted scene, sort of, as I said, explained like the dynamic of Troi and Worf's kind of dealing with their own shit that was actually kind of similar, but with Worf it was with his son, and with Troy's with her mother, which I think was a nice little interesting dynamic. Now, I read somewhere that originally this was the pairing of Troi and Worf was supposed to set up a romance between them, which was also hinted at in Ethics. This would be abandoned all the way up until season 7, which I think they should have kept it abandoned, because I just think it's a terrible idea. I don't care. Like, I just think it's a terrible idea. I like their chemistry in this episode, but they shouldn't be a couple. I didn't get that impression at all. Like, I didn't see anything romantic about their dealings, but I just felt like she was doing her fucking job as ship's counselor. So yeah. The storyline with the husband coming on board was a bit, by the numbers, or, her getting married to this guy. And I did find it a little funny, though, that he was actually kind of the exact opposite of her. And just the look that Picard and Troi shot each other when the guy was like, "Oh, we can't just abandon ourselves to the moment and just do whatever we please, that would be unpardonable. And Lwaxana is like, yes, absolutely unpardonable. And then but Jean-Luc and Deanna just look at each other like, oh my fucking god, because that's her whole mantra. That's her her deal. That's all she does is live in the moment and does whatever she wants. So he was clearly the absolute wrong match. And it was kind of, I think it was a little bit relatable that she was just feeling lonely and she was getting old and she was just settling for what was available. And I think the Muse just kind of repeated this storyline, even though most of it took place off screen and we just saw the aftermath of it. And that's why, part of the reason why I fucking hate that episode. I'm sorry, some people will say, oh, it's only the Jake stuff that's wrong. No, the Lwaxana stuff sucks a lot. Hashtag fuck the Muse. Anyway, because this episode did it first and it did it better. Why are you just going to repeat some bullshit and do some sitcom bullshit with Odo saying a love poem or something the other guy really I'm sorry, I'm not here to talk about that episode. Hashtag fuck the Muse. Anyway, so yeah, I thought that this... the whole thing with the father, the potential husband was a little silly, but it was okay. Like, I didn't think it was absolutely hilarious, but it was interesting. It was fine. Now, there was that one scene they were trying to do like a comedy bit where that was like very confusing, where the husband guy wanted to do the... go over some things for the wedding, and the protocol master was there and being like, no, we have to do this, and being a dick. And then Worf and Alexander came in and she's like, oh, I'm going to take him to the holodeck. And they were getting all pissy. It's like, no, we were supposed to do this now. It's unacceptable. We need to do this now. And then Deanna and Worf show up to pick up Alexander, and everyone's arguing with each other, and it's very sort of a chaotic moment. Alexander's in there like practicing his laughing, going, ah! And it's a very sort of, it's supposed to be like a comedic, chaotic scene. And I think it partially works. It's not bad, but and it is kind of funny, but it's not. They didn't pull it off completely well, and I think it's funny because this episode is written by Peter Allen Fields, and there's another episode that does this same bit but much better, and that was also written by Peter Allen Fields, which is the episode The Circle in Deep Space Nine, where they had a bit where Odo was talking to Kira about how she was getting kicked off the station and how she should fight for it, but then people kept showing up one at a time, and it was very chaotic and it was very comedic, and then Quark shows up and goes, a party, and everyone's like cross-talking and everything. That was actually a much better scene. And it's funny that Peter Allen Fields wrote both of these scenes. It seems like he perfected it with that later episode. Because I could see that this scene was very similar and like trying to do the same thing, but it kind of partly got there, partly pulled it off, but the DS9 scene in The Circle was magnificent. Like, they absolutely pulled it off, so it was actually much better than this one, but I will give that scene an A for effort. Nice try. As for the stuff with the Parallax Colony on the holodeck program, some people seem to really hate this. I don't. As I said, I love the higher the fewer the gag. I just think that, I don't know why. Because it makes no sense. This is random bullshit. It's going, oh, higher the fewer. And then Alexander just catching on to that and going around saying it randomly. I just think that's funny. I don't know why. That just hit my particular quirky sense of humor, I guess. The rest of it, though, as I said, Worf smashing the bubble was fucking hilarious. But other than that, like, yeah, it seemed like kind of childish humor. I think in the Patreon comments, someone's going to compare it to the kiddie program, the like child program in Voyager, where they did with Naomi Wildman. I can't remember what it was called. The stupid one that she had an episode about her going and watching this kid program in the holodeck that was very much like kids shows, and it did like. And I see the comparison because the way that the characters in this holodeck program talk does remind me a lot of like kids shows like the Mr. Rogers or Captain Kangaroo or Pee-wee's Playhouse, you know, those live action kids shows that have characters like show up and like, hi, I'm Mr. Whatever, and it seemed like very similar. The characters in this program seem very similar to that. They're like, oh, these are my worlds, don't ever eat one of your worlds or whatever, and the two people arguing about everything. Yeah, so it did remind me of one of those type. And by the way, I never liked those kind of kid shows when I was a kid. I pretty much avoided anything that was live action. I only liked cartoons. And that also was true of movies. Like, there was a few movies that were live action that I tolerated, like Willy Wonka. Maybe Wizard of Oz I kind of tolerated, but most of them, like, I just didn't like live action kids movies or cartoon or shows. I only liked the cartoons. I remember I used to hate stuff like Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and stuff like that. I absolutely hated them. I think I used to like Herbie, but that was when I was like 5. But when I was a bit older, like 8 or 9, I definitely didn't like any of those live action stuff. So it did, yeah. So it reminded me of that, so I didn't really think that well of it, but it wasn't. I don't think it was anywhere near as terrible as the Voyager episode where they had that kids program. I think that was way worse. Because this one, I mean, it was kind of funny with the Hire the Fewer guy and Worf smashing the bubble. At least it had that. And also, it's weird because the holodeck program on Voyager was particularly a kids holodeck program. It's meant for kids. Whereas this was apparently just based off of a real life place, so they actually go around acting all silly like this in real life. I don't know, but as far as it being like acting like it's made for kids, then we have a scene that's really not appropriate for kids when they're in the mud bath and they're like, bring on the entertainment, and a half naked lady who's like barely has, is barely covered, is basically naked, dancing very seductively. And I was like, and the guy that said hire the fewer like blew her a kiss. I'm like, this is like if they're at a strip club. What the fuck? Like, they're all acting like they're in Pee-wee's Playhouse or acting like they're in Mr. Rogers, and they're like, oh, I'm a silly guy, hey kids, and then all of a sudden a stripper comes out and they start like putting money. Like, what the hell? Like, I guess at this stage, sadly, Roddenberry has passed, but I guess they're keeping his, sexual proclivities alive with shit like this. Like, that just doesn't. What? I thought this was like a kid's show, and all of a sudden, a stripper shows up. It's like, what? I don't know. That was just weird. More than anything, I'm not like, you naked lady, you shouldn't do that. I don't care, but it's more along the lines of what? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And why would she bring Alexander? And of course, this happens to be when Worf and Deanna show up, and Lwaxana's like, oh, come in, have a mud bath. And so maybe that's why they did it, so they could have a moment when Worf and Deanna was like, oh my god, you're showing a naked lady to my son, blah, 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 blah. I don't know, but I don't think that worked particularly well, but I didn't think it was the worst thing ever. Like, some people really hate it, and I was perfectly fine with it. But one thing I will say, getting a little bit personal, is that watching this episode brought up a lot of personal shit for me, particularly with Worf and the way he dealt with Alexander. Reminded me a lot of my childhood, because particularly the one thing that really rang true is that scene where Alexander showed up to Counselor Troy's office, and Lwaxana was in there, and she was like, "Oh, your meeting's not for another hour, a couple hours. Why are you here?" And she's like, "Oh, I went to leave before my father got home." That really hit a personal chord with me, because I remember when I was in school, I would come home at 3 o'clock, and my father would get home from work around 5:30. And I remember those 2 hours, those 2.5 hours, was like I treasured them by myself and having this alone time, being able to relax. And I would just dread when he would get home, because he would just yell at me to clean shit or do chores, and he would always be angry, always be yelling. And so I related so much to Alexander in this case, that Worf was constantly yelling at him, "Oh, pick up your clothes and do these chores," and blah blah, and just yelling at him always, because that's, yeah. So I kind of related to this episode. It kind of brought back some childhood memories for me in that regard. So that makes me appreciate this episode a lot more, that they sort of hit that sort of chord, and I really related to Alexander in that instance. So let's talk about the B plot. So I've been counting down, because I talked when I first started covering Season 5, I talked about how I believe Season 5 of TNG is the worst season of Star Trek, to do this format where they have a character story as the A plot, and this throwaway nonsense is the B plot, just in order to have some scientific, usually some anomaly or some bullshit, in order to have, a threat or like some sciencey things happening. In the B plot is completely separate from the A plot. So it's different than a simple A plot, B plot split. It's more of a B plot that is just some scientific nonsense that nobody actually gives a shit about, and it's just there to take up space and to create tension. So this is number 6 in Season 5, and if you're thinking, well, I thought you were up to 4 last time, Mark, why are we all of a sudden up to 6? It's because number 5 was a revisited, so unless you're a Patreon supporter, you probably didn't see it, which was the episode The Outcast. That was number 5 and having a B plot anomaly bullshit. So this is number 6, and this is probably the worst example of a throwaway bullshit B plot, and so it does bring the episode down a bit. Now, I'm not saying it's the worst episode to do it. That's Masterpiece Society easily, but their B plot at least was kind of, I mean, Masterpiece Society is just a terrible episode overall, but at least their B plot was kind of related to the A plot. Here, this is like the worst example of a nonsensical B plot, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the A plot. In fact, it's kind of like they don't even exist at the same time. The A plot, the characters in the A plot never even acknowledge this bullshit B plot's going on. Well, 2 times. They acknowledge it twice. Once when Lwaxana orders something from the replicators, and they're like sausages in her tea, and she drinks the tea anyway. That's like disgusting. Why would she do that? But anyway, and the second time is when they're Lwaxana and Alexander in the holodeck, and they see like the holodeck starts to shiver and malfunction, and you see the little pixie dust, whatever the hell it is there, and they're like, "Come on, Alexander, let's go." But that's it. That's the only time the A plot even acknowledges that the B plot exists, and otherwise, and the B plot is just so throwaway. And Peter Allen Fields did talk about how he hated this and he didn't want to do it, but Rick Berman was like, "Oh, we need to have some science in here because this is a science fiction show." And Peter Allen Fields is like, "But this is a personal story. This is a character story. We should focus on the characters." But no, of course, Rick Berman, in his infinite wisdom, decreed that they have to fucking do this. And it's so throwaway. I really would not give the slightest bit of a shit about this bullshit B plot. I didn't even mention it in my synopsis because it's so irrelevant. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I think it does bring the episode down a bit. But yeah, other than that, I think this was an enjoyable episode and a good character piece. So anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It helps me continue with the channel and helps me keep going. And I would like to give a very special thanks to Brandon Neil Howells. Thank you so much for all your support throughout the years. And I would also like to give a shout out to Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Michelissio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce. Thank you so very, very much for your support. So, we do have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, "The higher, the fewer." My review will come later, just had to say that now. Okay. So next comment is from Antarius, who says, "Not again. I saw enough about Worf's parenting problems and Lwaxana Troi's marriage plans. The concept of small malfunctions escalating to a big crisis is also anything but original. How often has they picked up some alien passing through their habitat? How often has Data saved the ship because he's android in nature? This time there is really no connection between both plots. Afterwards, no one seems to be at all affected by the fact that the disaster almost occurred. The holodeck program is almost as annoying as Voyager's The Adventure of Flutter." Yeah, thank you, that's the name of it. "If it's supposed to be a children's program, why does it feature almost naked dancers? At least the moment when Alexander meets Mr. Holm at the door made me smile. It seems like Lwaxana has studied her fiancé's culture just as intensively as Tasha Yar did with the Edo legal system and the episode Justice. My rating is a 3 out of 10. Yeah, God, Yar sucked. Yeah, Lwaxana, I don't think she gave a shit. She's just like, oh yeah, this guy wants to marry me and he's royalty, so... And that's as far as her research went. And yeah, that's true about Data. See, here's the thing. People in other episodes talk about how Data's a security risk, but almost the exact same number of times that Data's been a security risk, she's also saved the entire ship. It's also like everyone would have died if it wasn't for him. So I think that counterbalances that. But yeah, it's funny because, I mean, I already talked about how no one had really acknowledged the B plot, but really, like, they were all knocked unconscious and from lack of oxygen, which can cause brain damage for a prolonged period of times. And everyone went through that, and they're all sweating, and they all went through this huge ordeal, and it was just completely erased and wiped clean like it never fucking happened. Picard wakes up, he's perfectly fine. It's like, oh, I got a wedding to go to. Like, y'all just almost fucking died, and you should be feeling like after effects. But anyway, it was really really dumb. So, anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, "Okay, I actually liked this episode and consider it one of the better efforts for some clear comedic moments. Of course, what makes the comedy successful is Michael Dorn, who has shown comedic moments with Worf before, but as shown as the somewhat stern but unsure father, how he is relentless is in the mud bath, and perhaps my favorite Worf comedic moment when he pops that happy ball. Pure classic TNG moment as far as I'm concerned, as well as the moment where Majel Barrett speaks to herself from Lwaxana to the computer. Never mind that 3 years earlier she had no clue what a holodeck is, and that she had no problem getting a program she wanted. Still delightfully worked. Even Bonzel as Alexander is actually quite enjoyable in this episode. Troi had an interesting solution for how to improve things that Worf would understand, which unfortunately Lwaxana mocked, I'd argue. The problem with this episode, well, put your fingers over your lip, Mark. It's time to design a new ship. I'm sorry. I mean, the number of times the D is in danger, yet another anomaly is comical. It's time to design a new ship. If the flagship is always vulnerable to these anomalies and potentially weakens when it counts, like say in cause and effect. Plus, no response from Lwaxana's betrothal and the diplomats to the perilous experience. They don't seem to even acknowledge that this happened, as heaven forbid there's any connection between the A and B story at all. It's like a third season Voyager episode. I mean, where was Tom Paris in sickbay after trying to do something daredevilishly stupid in the shuttlecraft? Granted, a lookalike does appear this season, but not now. Then there's Lwaxana's growth in this episode. You know, between Half Alive and what she's finally decided to do, observing the Betazoid tradition would get her betrothal to leave. She shows character growth in both these episodes. And yet, in a Deep Space Nine episode that begins with a M, it's like she got mind wiped. I don't know, was the muse on the planet Lwaxana was on, and then traveled to the transport to Deep Space Nine later? I assume she was on the same ship. Does being around her have some inadvertent effect on Betazoids? Maybe that explains it, but otherwise, Lwaxana as anti-meme to Alexander, I actually quite liked it, and my headcanon says that she visited other times when it was actually a thankfully fun parental figure Alexander needed, especially with no mother. Whenever I see others attack this episode because it has Lwaxana and Alexander in it, two annoying characters, etc., I'd say, but they worked so well together and Worf was so funny. Only remaining controversial aspect would be the nudity and exposure of it to Alexander. I'd say in response, that's us and our backwards values, and we're the problem here, because otherwise it seems a festive, fine taste enough and simply went well with Lwaxana and Troi's carefree Betazoid nature. So I'll give it 7.5, the higher the viewers, out of 10. Well, there we go. I guess now all my Patreon supporters were negative on it. Norman, of course, said a lot of things I totally agree with. I think this is a pretty fun episode. And yeah, the Muse sucks. Hashtag fuck the Muse. Just like I was saying, that it just erased the character growth he went through in both these episodes and just repeated the same bullshit that they've already done here. Anyway, yeah, the whole the B story is quite terrible, and I do wonder if Voyager season 3 is going to have more or just as many of this A plot B plot nonsense that season 5 has, but we'll see. I think it's between those two seasons. they're going to be competing with each other. Anyway, Norman Buckwald has another comment saying, okay, I have to give a reply now as Mark accidentally misread something I said in New Ground. I was comparing Worf's bad parenting not to Seven's. Hey, she did a great job, especially starting with 1. I was comparing his bad parenting to Seven of Nine's parents and Icheb's parents, saying, while Worf is not as bad as either one of those sets of parents, he's not that much better. And to use Mark's assertive statement, and I stand by it, Worf is such an awful father, canon-wise, and in DS9, when Miles called him out on it, I said, yeah, and that's before we saw Teen Alexander. Anyway, I wanted to make it clear to all that's what I meant, and I apologize if I was not clear before. And finally, since I haven't provided it from above since I referred to this episode, hashtag fuck the Muse, and that includes the Lwaxana B story. 1 mind suck out of 10 for the Muse. Yeah, fuck the Muse. That's right. Hashtag fuck the Muse. You probably didn't write it wrong. I probably just read it wrong. I probably just misunderstood. I thought you were talking about Seven of Nine being a parent to Icheb, but you were talking about Seven of Nine's parents and Icheb's parents, which makes a lot more sense because, both those parents are arguably worse than Worf and much terrible because Icheb's parents, tried to have him killed twice, so not very good parents. Not going to win Parent of the Year for trying to have him killed. So they're definitely the worst. Seven of Nine's parents was reckless and took her on the adventure to the Borg. But here's the thing. I have a hard time judging that correctly because that whole storyline is just a big ball of bullshit and shouldn't exist because no one knew about the Borg when 709 was that age because Q hadn't flung the fucking Enterprise in front of them yet. So that whole thing doesn't even exist in my mind. That's not even canon as far as I'm concerned. But that is just me. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, my rating for cost of living, can I have my 45 minutes back? 2 out of 10. The First Duty comment. This episode was great. This episode came out today. If this episode came out today and was in the Discovery era, you can imagine people would say Michael Burnham saves the day again because she's the only person to know what Nova Squadron did, even if they were at Starfleet Academy and no one else considered that. Oh wait, was it Picard that knew all? Yes, you are correct, Stephen. It's a TNG episode. Can you explain why Picard knew this and no one else even considered this? This answer is so simple because Picard is the main character. I always disliked this part of Star Trek that humans were supposed to be portrayed as perfect and Earth is a paradise, so I'm glad we got an episode that shows 3 humans who lie. I know we got a lot more episodes with human characters not being portrayed as perfect human. I would love to live in Star Trek Utopia, but unfortunately that will never happen. I know I said I disliked this part of Star Trek, but I can always dream of a better world with no hatred. It is amazing how many people of the Star Trek fan base actually miss the point of Star Trek. My rating for First Duty is an 8 out of 10. The Outcast comment. I know people think it's not realistic that Riker would fall in love with Soren and Mark will fall out of his chair with what I'm about to say. I buy Riker's feeling towards Soren. I know it's TV logic that a character can love someone with one episode, but when it works, it works. Riker was so lucky his captain wasn't Sisko or Janeway, as they wouldn't been that understanding like Picard was, especially with Riker going down to the planet a second time. My rating for The Outcast, 7. Why did Worf go with Riker? Did he forget the last episode when he wouldn't help Worf with something? Out of 10. Season 5 of Discovery was very good and the best of the show. It's my third favorite season of Modern Trek. Strange New Worlds Season 1, Lower Decks Season 3 are better. I'm so glad that Discovery never used the Borg because they're just a joke now. My rating is for Season 5 of Discovery is 8 out of 10. So none of this is really having to do with cost of living, but that's all good. I've already covered these episodes, so Stephen wouldn't have an opportunity to make a comment on them. As far as the first duty goes, I'd buy that Picard is the one to figure it out and that no one else figured it out, because it's not something that's that commonly known. It's that whole Colbert starburst. It had been banned from the Academy like 100 years ago. It's not a very common thing, and I think it's just a rare luck that Picard knew it. And plus, like, Geordi had just uncovered that, Wesley was playing with his plasma exhaust or whatever, which the investigators probably saw that and was like, that's weird, but didn't actually think much about it. It's just because Picard had it in mind. So I do buy that. It's just me personally, I do buy that. And I also like Star Trek Utopia's future. I'll agree with you there. I'm not sure if we need to show that humanity isn't perfect, but whenever they do, I tend to like it because it leads to good storytelling. So I don't begrudge them to do that. Now, as far as the Outcast goes, you'll notice I didn't fall out of my chair when you said that you buy Riker and Soren. I personally don't, but I don't think it's the most outrageous thing ever. Because I can kind of see what they were trying to do. I can kind of see a spark of something going on between them, but I just don't think I think they oversold it when Riker was willing to throw his whole career away and even went to Troi and was like, oh, I'm in love with someone. That I think was overdoing it. I don't think they earned that. But that's not to say there was no chemistry between Riker and Soren, but not a lot. Not as much for me to buy what they did with him at the end of the episode, but that is just me. And I actually disagree that Sisko or Janeway... Well, Janeway probably would have been harsh on Riker, but maybe judging by the way she treated Harry Kim in the episode The Disease, but maybe she just did that because she fucking hates Harry Kim because she will never promote him and she's just a dick to Harry Kim. Maybe if it was her first, maybe it was Chakotay that did that, she wouldn't give a shit. So I think that Riker would have been fine with her. She just likes to pick on Harry Kim. And as far as Sisko goes, I was thinking of the episode Captive Pursuit, where O'Brien defied his orders and saved Tosk's life and fought with him and directly violated the Prime Directive, and Sisko dressed him down. But at the end, O'Brien's like, oh, I noticed that you kind of didn't catch me when you could have. And Sisko's like, well, I guess we missed that one. So it's clear that he still had O'Brien's back, even though officially he was yelling at him. Kind of did the same thing with Worf when he tried to kill Kern. That was an amazing scene, too, when Sisko was yelling at him. But still supported Worf. So he might have yelled at Riker and dressed him down, but in the end, he would have just been like, nah, you're good. That seems to be Sisko's MO. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, I don't like much of this episode, but something is wrong when Lwaxana and Alexander plot is more interesting than an orange goo dissolving the ship plot. Lwaxana Troi makes me grind my teeth, and I like Picard. And like Picard, I would be thrilled to give her away. It's cool to know that she met her husband to be on Spacebook. She got over Timothy very quickly. I'm not sure if I would take a 10-year-old child to the Parallax Colony, though. It comes across as Dr. Seuss gone creepy. How many times has the Enterprise D been infected by something which has caused the computer to crash? And the Mr. Wolf joke gets very tired very quickly. This could have been a good episode if it wasn't presented as a comedy. 4 Klingon fathers saying, I do not yell, out of 10. Yeah, I have to agree to disagree on this one. I'm loved that they did it as a comedy. I think it's one of the rare effective comedies in Star Trek. And thanks for reminding me about the whole Mr. Wolf thing, because I forgot to mention that. I fucking loved it. That was another funny part of this episode. Now, I did talk about in my review for Half a Life how that was the first time she called him Mr. Wolf, and I had forgotten about that until I rewatched that episode recently. But she only did it once in that episode, whereas in this episode she does it repeatedly, and it's really funny every time she does it. I don't get tired of it. I think it was hilarious. That was another thing I actually used to quote with my sister a lot, is saying, "Mr. Wolf, it is Worf, madam." Like, that's just funny shit. So no, actually, I like the comedy, but that is just me. Anyway, Stephen Kennedy has another comment. I gave Ethics a 4 out of 10 and Newground a 3 out of 10. Oh well, I may have fecked up. At least I didn't ask for my 45 minutes back. I don't really like to give episodes 1 or 2 ratings. There you go. I wasn't a big fan of Ethics, but I am a big fan of this. Well, not a big fan. I just liked it better than pretty much everyone except Norman. Anyway, thank you so much, patrons, for your comments. So my rating for Cost of Living out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. So I don't do 0.5s. Talked about this before, so I can't give it a 7.5 like Norman did. I'm not going to give it an 8 because that B plot really wipes out that possibility. Like, it can't get any higher than a 7 with that nonsensical bullshit B plot that is not barely even acknowledged by the A plot. But as far as the A plot goes, I think it was a good character story. Not the best, but it works. And it was funny. I like the humor in this. As I said, I think it's one of the rare cases the humor works. The higher the fewer, Worf popping the bubble, Mr. Wolf. Yeah, just all the classic moments. Worf in the mud bath. I mean, that was fucking hilarious. So, yeah, and I'm apparently not as bothered by this Parallax comedy. I just thought it was Colony, as a lot of people seem to be. I just thought it was a little weird that they had a stripper perform in front of a 8-year-old boy. I don't know. I know, and really, technically, in canon, he's 2 years old, but really, Klingons age fast, so he's essentially an 8-year-old, I guess. I don't know when Klingons became a comp-up, but whatever. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's not that I'm prudish and like, ooh, nudity gross, but it's just like, it's kind of weird. I don't know. I just find it kind of weird. But anyway, yeah, still overall enjoyed this episode. I think it was a very enjoyable episode. Good character stories, humorous. So 7 out of 10 for me. Now, it's funny when I give Cause and Effect an 8 out of 10. It seems like I hate the episode, compared to everyone else, because everyone else gives it a 10 out of 10 and calls it one of the best episodes that ever existed. So it feels like everyone's acting like I hate that episode because I gave it an 8 instead of 10. But in this case, I give this episode a 7. It feels like everyone's going to think like, I think this is the best episode ever and I absolutely love it. When in actuality, Cause and Effect is, I gave a higher rating. A higher the viewer. Sorry, had to do that. I gave it a higher rating than this episode. So I like Cause and Effect better in this episode. And yeah, you would think with the reactions I'm probably going to get on these 2 episodes, you would think it would be the other way around. And everyone's going to be like, oh, how dare you like this episode that much. But anyway. Anyway, so coming up next on my channel, let's see, Sunday night or Monday morning will be my review for House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 4. This next Tuesday will be my review for The Perfect Mate. I think that's going to be another time when I'm going to be a lot more negative than everyone else, but we'll see. Wednesday will be my review for Imaginary Friend. Thursday, I'm going to be over on Patreon for my Patreon supporters to do a revisited, this time revisiting my review for iBorg. And then Saturday, back on my main channel for another public review for the next phase. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation, also covering House of the Dragon and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.